Well, hi there, folks. Welcome to the program. This, of course, is Stinchfield, the podcast. Go figure, we got a federal judge who now thinks he's a doctor and can make better decisions than, quite frankly, the people who voted for President Trump to put a guy like RFK Jr. in and all the appointments. The vaccine schedule now thrown into the air for children, you name it. We're going to talk about that today. And then, of course, Susie Wiles, President Trump's chief of staff, diagnosed with breast cancer. And it got me thinking, does this have anything to do with the pandemic? We're seeing such a huge spike in cancers of so many kinds, but including breast cancer. And then this morning, I get my daily email from Dr. McCullough of the Wellness Company raising the question that this could be pandemic related, shot related, spike protein related. So I thought, let's get Dr. McCullough on the program to talk about all of that. Don't forget, the Wellness Company is the sponsor of today's podcast, twc.health/grant. Use the promo code GRANT for 10% off. And while we're talking about the spike protein, Ultimate Spike Detox, you got to be on this daily supplement. This would be a good move for you to get on. Dr. McCullough formulated this. We can talk a little bit about that as well. twc.health/grant. Use that promo code GRANT. All right, with that, folks, let's get the show started. We'll bring in Dr. McCullough.
Uncensored and unapologetic. This is Stinchfield. Here's your host, Grant Stinchfield.
All right, welcome, everybody. As promised, Dr. McCullough is with us of the Wellness Company. Doc, it's great to see you.
Great to see you.
All right, so literally, I was thinking about doing the story today, and I get the email from you raising the question, right? You haven't diagnosed or had any consulting with Susie Wiles. We don't even know if she got the shot. I would assume she did if she was as close to President Trump as she was. But your thoughts on what you're seeing now with her breast cancer diagnosis?
Well, I give credit to Trump. Trump was very upbeat about her prognosis and kind of presented it publicly when she was sitting right next to him. And breast cancer, if discovered early, of course, is treatable. Surgery is a primary mechanism. Then there's chemotherapy and radiation therapy added on. But breast cancer is on the rise. And now there have been studies that show that the vaccine has been found in breast cancer and the spike protein found in breast cancer. It's directly there. There are enough scientific studies to suggest that the vaccines and maybe probably the infection as well can promote cancer, Grant. So this is concerning. More and more information suggesting SARS-CoV-2 infection, which 90% of us had, and the vaccines, which 81% of us took, could actually promote cancer. Now, Susie Wiles is 68. She's a few years older than me. Her mother died at age 71 of an abdominal cancer. And it does raise the question. So, my advice to patients like her is, for sure, on the biopsy, stain the biopsy for spike protein, see if it's there, and then do what's called reverse qPCR to see if Pfizer or Moderna, if she took them, is there in the cancer tissue. It may change prognosis, probably is going to open up some additional treatment, natural treatment options like the Ultimate Spike Detox, Shield, which is another product from the Wellness Company, and even ivermectin mebendazole as a combination, additional product to use. The goal would be to essentially be cured of the cancer. How does somebody know if they're cured of breast cancer? It's typically, if they go 5 years without a recurrence, they're out of the woods.
So she now has this diagnosis. We don't know if she took the spike protein or not, but you said we've seen a increase in breast cancer since when? 2020? Is that?
Yeah.
And how does anybody argue with this? Because it seems to me there's so many in mainstream science, if you want to call it that continue to argue with these statistics that literally show a dramatic increase in these types of cancers.
Well, they seem to have an oblivion for what just happened to humanity, which was this 6-year pandemic. So a year ago, Grant, Time magazine on its cover said, it had all these young people. It says, where are all these cancers coming from in young people? That's on the cover of Time magazine. Essentially, they're calling out turbo cancer. They interviewed directors of cancer centers all over the United States. and they're scratching their heads. Well, is it microplastics or pollution or climate change? I mean, they consider all these hypotheses, but not a single one considered the pandemic. Either the SARS-CoV-2 infection, remember the virus comes out of a Chinese biosecurity lab, it's not a natural virus, or the vaccines, which superload the body with the spike protein. So this oblivion, this complete blindside to an obvious factor to consider is stupendous.
Do you know, I would love for a awake psychologist, someone that thinks like we to do a psychological assessment of these doctors, because I think it's willful blindness. And it may be subconscious that they just don't want to admit that they were wrong over the years, but clearly it's blindness. The question then becomes, is do they just refuse to acknowledge what's right before their eyes because they're embarrassed?
Grant, the same thing occurred with smoking. So if we go back to 1950 and we'd say, listen, we're concerned smoking is causing lung cancer, all the doctors and nurses were smoking. They would say, we refuse to consider this as a possibility. In fact, in Mukherjee's Pulitzer Prize-winning book, The Emperor of All Maladies, the lead surgeon for Johns Hopkins, who was taking out lung cancers, smoked while he did the surgery and refused to admit smoking played a role. He himself died of lung cancer, Grant.
That's unbelievable. You mentioned President Trump talking about Susie Wiles' diagnosis. I did pull it, and I do think he really has a fondness for Susie Wiles. I don't know whether it's just because she's right there next to him the whole time, but he looks at this woman, boy, maybe, I don't know. I don't know if it's his favorite in the administration, but it's clearly pretty close. Let me play the clip for you, Doc.
Also, introduce Susie Wiles, who's fantastic. She's our chief of staff, and she's an amazing person, an amazing fighter. And she announced a minor difficulty, which will be in good shape for, he'll be around for a long time. She had a diagnosis, you probably saw it, and she's going to take care of it immediately, as opposed to waiting. She said, let's do it now. I said, do it immediately. Because with that particular ailment, the faster the better. That's the only thing I know about it. The faster the better. She's going to do it immediately. So she just started, actually. And she's going to be in great shape. The prognosis there is excellent, beyond excellent. So,
thank you, sir.
But who needs it, right?
That's right.
Who needs it?
So he's such a positive guy. Really, people misunderstand the president. I mean, he really is an optimistic guy when you look at him.
He is, and he does give tremendous praise and credit to Susie Wiles. I agree. I think of anybody in his circles, I think he, greatly appreciates her contribution. Now, remember in Trump 1.0, there was tremendous chaos in the White House. We had different chiefs of staff. We actually had different press secretaries. And, we had lots of hirings and firings. Not the case in Trump 2.0. It's a very steady. We've had a very steady cabinet with the exception of Kristi Noem leaving. And we've had one press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, who is pregnant, and one chief of staff, now Susie Wiles, who has breast cancer. But, the announcement was that she's going to work all the way through. So I presume right now she's probably started some chemotherapy prior to her surgery, which hopefully will be either a mastectomy or a lumpectomy. But I hope they do a good job with the tissue and take these extra steps, because right now, no one should ignore COVID, the infection, or the vaccines as a cause of their medical problems.
Doc, did I read it correctly in your focal points this morning? And I urge everyone to subscribe to your focal points. Is it Substack? Is that where it is?
Yeah.
I just click on it and go there when I get the email. But that you can back test and figure out exactly whether it was Johnson & Johnson or Moderna. You could figure out what it was.
Yeah, well, remember, Janssen, that's an adenoviral vector. That'll be long gone. There's no one's found the Janssen, genetic apparatus in the human body. You can find the spike protein. But Pfizer and Moderna have been found in the human body now. And we have a paper published on this in my patient here in Dallas, Grant, that he has Pfizer in his body 3.6 years after the vaccine. And it has a specific code. You can figure it out on testing. And the vaccine produces a particular spike protein that has 2 amino acid inserts. It's like a little fingerprint, and you can figure out if it's vaccine spike protein or if it's from the infection.
So I think I know the answer to this, but why is that important that we do that? And it sounds to me like that should be done in every case of cancer we get now, in order to really try to drill down on what could be at the root of all of this.
Right, because if spike protein is playing a role, the spike protein depresses our tumor surveillance systems. And it's P53, and then in her, what's called BRCA. It's a natural tumor suppressor system. Now, if there's a genetic defect in BRCA, it could even be worse. But the point is, spike protein can be cleared from the body with the ultimate spike detox. So you'd hate to have cancer, not have the spike protein assessed in the tissues or an antibody test in the bloodstream, and then sure enough miss the cause, because spike protein invariably is going to be a driver of recurrent cancer. So you'd want to get rid of the root cause. All
right. So again, Dr. McCullough pointed it out. Ultimate Spike Detox, twc.health/grant. twc.health/grant. Let me give you a quick reminder, too, of the product that started it all for the wellness company. That's their emergency medical kit. With everything going on in Iran right now, we've already had 200 medications on the FDA's shortage list. We could really have a serious situation of medications. You're not having them available at the drugstore or whatever. Now you have them in your house. This is one kit. There are many, but I urge you to go check these out. Ivermectin in this kit, amoxicillin, doxycycline, whole bunch of medications that you need to keep your family safe. twc.health/grant. Use the promo code GRANT. Doc, I guess I'll ask you that medical kit. I call it a medical kit, but it's really a prescription drug kit. I don't want people to confuse it with like a first aid kit. It is important to have at home, isn't it?
Oh my gosh. Grant, the other night, we went out for a dinner party. I thought it was great. I didn't have any problems. My wife developed the most brutal case of food poisoning. And I've always wondered, we ate the same thing. What happened? But believe me, she was really, really sick. Thank goodness we had the Zofran from the emergency medical kit, which actually stopped the vomiting, which otherwise was not going to stop. And then later on, we actually needed the Imodium in the kit to stop the diarrhea.
Wow.
Otherwise, her entire weekend would have been trashed, or she'd have to go to urgent care. And urgent care is such a hassle. It's very expensive. And the emergency medical kits are a fraction of the cost of going to urgent care. And we are able to manage it at home. Simple food poisoning, Grant, it can happen to anybody.
Yeah, amazing. So again, folks, twc.health/grant. Use that promo code GRANT for 10% off. And Dr. McCullough summed it up as to the reasons why you ought to get that. Doc, it's interesting. You had mentioned before we came on, you asked if I had my spike protein tested.
Yeah.
I'm amazed we're at a spot now where nearly every ailment somebody gets, we're instantly thinking, could this be the spike protein responsible or the vaccine, the COVID jab responsible? Now, I did not get the COVID jab, and you and I have talked about this. For everybody at home, the background of this is I believe I have vertigo. I can't even remember the name. BPPV, by something.
Benign positional vertigo. BPV.
Benign positional vertigo, where the crystals in my ear get moved around in the wrong canal. And let me tell you, it'll make the room spin. And I knew it. If I turn my head right while I lie down, I get the room starts going crazy. If I turn my head back left, it kind of goes away. I didn't realize that until later. But I had to go to the urgent care to give me an EKG. Long story short, Dr. McCullough was a savior to me. I texted him my EKG, which they told me was totally abnormal. Doc, one of the world-renowned cardiologists. One look at it said, "No, you're fine." After I go back to the emergency room and all this, but you had asked, did you have your spike checked? I think this is a sign that it is criminal what they did to us. Are you thinking that my vertigo could be something with the virus or the spike protein, or it could be shedding? I know people that have gotten the vax that I'm near.
It's possible. I think it's unrelated, but this is the reason why it's important. You can get it measured yourself, Grant. If you go to LabCorp labs on demand. You just do it yourself. Infectious diseases and immunity, and click COVID antibody test. That'll give you the premier test. You pay $69 online. Go into LabCorp, get it measured. If your number comes out less than 1,000, I can tell you, you rule out any spike protein effect in your dizziness or vertigo or anything else. But if you're over 1,000, it's possible. And, I got to tell you, I was over 2,000. I didn't take the shots either, but I had COVID early in 2020 and then probably later on. And, I had to go on the spike detox, and I'm still on it, but I've lowered it. I just checked it recently, Grant. I'm 900, so I know that I'm free and clear now. And you always have some antibody, but there's no more spike in the system, almost certainly, from the published literature. And I feel great. But, I don't want to be like my patient I had earlier, a young guy who never took the shots, but he has COVID and he ends up with a heart attack or ends up with a stroke. I see these all the time, Grant.
And a healthy guy.
Yeah, perfectly healthy.
Yeah. All right. And so, look, obviously you went from 2,000 down to 900. I'm going to get it tested. I just think we're at a point now where all these problems, I hear colon cancer issues, you hear stroke issues, you hear myocarditis, the swelling of the heart, you got breast cancer. This thing was a disaster. And whether you get it from COVID, what was the real disaster was it was exacerbated by the jab.
Correct. Yeah, that's the correct interpretation. So because the vaccines didn't work, a lot of people got COVID. Some people had COVID early, and they were told to take the shots anyway. So they got super loaded with the spike protein. Fortunately, virtually no one's taking it now. In some countries, it's worse. Like in Japan, they're very compliant in Japan. I have colleagues over there tell me they got people, 4, 6, 7, 8 shots. I know very few people who have done the full ladder of shots, Grant, and most people stopped early.
So this brings us to the next topic, which I'm so angry about. A federal judge in Massachusetts basically throws out Robert F. Kennedy Jr. It's really not even his. It's the whole panel of, I believe, 17 people that come up with the recommendations for what you need when it comes to the vaccine schedule. This judge decides that those 17 people are wrong. He decides that the American people who voted President Trump to appoint Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is wrong and upends the vaccine schedule. And what was it? All he did was he dropped recommendations for hepatitis A, hepatitis B, RSV, and a couple forms of bacterial meningitis. And then he removed the COVID shot for under 65 healthy kids and pregnant women. Your thoughts to a judge stepping in here where he shouldn't?
Well, let's give the backdrop here. So the American Academy of Pediatrics, AAP, plus 6 other organizations became a class, and they are a group of plaintiffs, and they sued RFK and HHS as a defendant, and they got the case in front of a Massachusetts liberal judge, Brian Murphy. Now, you may remember that name, Grant. He's been blocking the deportation of illegal immigrants. I mean, he is a Biden-appointed liberal judge who sided with the plaintiffs and reversed all the progress on vaccine reform, all of it. And so stayed all the decisions made by the ACIP panel, essentially wiped it out, and we're back to square one. The reason why this is important is that whatever this panel decides becomes state law for the kids taking vaccines for school. And so we are back to square one on vaccines. Now, fortunately, in Texas, we have a lot of state protections. People can have medical, religious, and philosophical exemptions for public schools, but other states are not so lucky.
Well, some of these, and are you okay, Doc, too? Do you need a drink of water, or are you good?
No, I'm good.
You're good. Okay. The good thing about a podcast is if I was on the Real America's Voice show, I got to hold it in and my eyes start watering as I'm holding in a cough. But on this show, I could say, you can go get some water, come back, and I'll be here for you and I can cover. But the thing with this is when you look at what hepatitis A and hepatitis B kids aren't really coming down with this stuff. Why would you overload kids with many of these meningitis is another example of this. Why would you overload kids with this when they're really not at any risk of coming up with this unless the mother has it?
Well, that's right. It needs to be risk stratified. So let's take hepatitis B on the first day of life. There's 3.3 million children born each year in the United States, and most are perfectly healthy. We test the mothers for hepatitis B. Now, it turns out 25,000 mothers each year have hepatitis B, and they're largely immigrants from other countries. And they have to go through a protocol where they get, the mothers themselves get the vaccine. They have to get a drug called fasinavir, an antiviral. The babies get hepatitis B immunoglobulin and the vaccine. So that's very effective in blocking transmission from mother to baby. But it is only needed in 25,000 pregnancies, not 3.3 million. The other kids who are born should not get the vaccine until they're much later in life and they face particular risks of hepatitis B. Like I took the shots, Grant, because, I'm in medicine. I can get exposed to IV drug abusers, what have you. You probably took it because you were in the military, your blood and guts and stuff. But, the average
I wasn't
baby
in the military,
born,
by the way, just to be, everybody thinks I was a military guy, but
you just look like a military guy.
Maybe that's what it is. I'm always honored. Everybody always tells me, hey, you're a military. Thank you for serving. And I never did. I was a good cheerleader for them, but I never was. Well,
listen, Grant, you could have been a fireman or a policeman or a first responder. All these people need the hepatitis B vaccine. Listen, I took it. It's a fine vaccine for the right person. What the committee was trying to do is say, listen, let's not overload the babies with things they don't need. I'll tell you another thing babies don't need. They don't need adult influenza vaccines. They start giving the little babies adult flu shots at 6 months.
All right.
It's completely unnecessary.
So, by the way, I was a fireman and an emergency medical technician in my very early adult years on a basically part-time basis. But so
I bet you took the shot. Did they have you take hepatitis B shot?
I don't remember. I don't remember ever going to get shots, but maybe that was so long ago that they weren't thinking about it. But it probably would have been a good idea if you're dealing with all those patients and everything in the back of an ambulance. But anyway, my point to this is I owned an oil change business. If I do 25,000 cars a year, I probably would make a lot of money. But if I did oil changes for 3 million cars a year, well, I'm going to be making a lot more money, right?
Yeah. Right.
This is the drug companies. If they go down to only 25,000 shots of the vaccine for hepatitis B, well, that's a lot less than 3 million. That has a huge effect on their bottom line, I would think.
Well, for sure. And, the AAP, this pediatric group, they're directly funded by these vaccine companies. So you can see the loop right there.
So I saw one of the groups, there were 200 groups that were against RFK Jr.'s recommendations. And by the way, they're called recommendations. It doesn't mean it's a mandate. It means this is what we recommend. Your doctor may recommend something else. You guys talk whatever you want. It should be up to the patient and the doctor. Am I right?
That's right. It's called shared decision-making. Everything should be shared decision-making. So none of the vaccines were taken away. This is about, I think, a group of plaintiffs and a liberal judge that were directly, directing their animus against the Trump and RFK administration.
That's what it is. I know you're short on time. I got one more question for you. I used to be a naysayer when I thought vaccines could cause autism. I really was. I was like, there's no evidence of this going back. Now I see lots of evidence that it certainly could be. I fall into the camp, and you've explained it, how there's a lot of evidence that the sheer number of shots at one time could be responsible for this. But I saw of the groups that were suing RFK Jr. and HHS, the Autism Science Foundation. Now, how could a group like the Autism Science Foundation be suing an individual and an agency that's trying to prevent autism? And the bottom line is not getting the shot won't cause autism, even if you take the theory that, okay, causing the shot doesn't, but not taking it certainly doesn't. I mean, that's zero. So why would that group get involved?
Oh, that's a very interesting question. The Autism Advocacy Network, the Autism Science Foundation, others, all the autism support societies, refuse to recognize any connection between childhood vaccination and autism. And, I don't know for sure, Grant, but I would investigate the lines of funding to these organizations. If they're funded by, let's say, a pro-vaccine NGO like the Gates Foundation or Rockefeller Foundation or Wellcome Trust or the vaccine companies themselves, I would look at big-time funding of these organizations. It's sad because, instead of just supporting autism, you'd think they'd want to get to the root cause.
I wonder if you go to, this is probably for most diseases, but you go to almost every one of these organizations. I bet if I start to look, and maybe I need to do this, I'll bet you're going to see Big Pharma putting lots of money towards these organizations so they keep their mouths shut. That's basically just paying off. I'm not saying that's the case with this Autism Science Foundation. I'd love to talk to them if they'd like to come on. But it certainly raises questions as to why not just look at the evidence, assess, and then let people make a decision.
Right. But the real interesting question is, why would they even get involved in this? If they thought vaccines were completely unrelated one way or the other, why would they be in a plaintiff class against Trump and RFK? That's really interesting. I think investigative reporting is going to help us learn a lot more about that.
I think so. Dr. McCullough, you're great. I always appreciate it. And you are so kind to answer my text messages at 8 o'clock at night on, I don't know, was it a Sunday? I think it was a Sunday night with my EKG. Please help me. But you become a good friend. So thank you. I owe you a dinner.
Okay. Thanks, Grant. Make sure you visit a wellness company, twc.health/Grant, to get your discount. I know you met with our leaders recently, Grant. They really, really thank you for your time and your support.
Well, they're great, and the leadership at the Wellness Company is fabulous. Everybody involved with that company is great. And I'll reiterate what you just said, Doc. Let me give the address on where to go. And folks, so many great products at the Wellness Company, including this weight loss. It's a drop now. Trizepatide, which is the GLP-1s that normally come in a shot form. You can get it with a drop. And having great success, all the Wellness Company patients that are on this drop are really shedding weight like it's going out of style. So
and we've gone to dissolvable tirzepatide, which is in the shot form. It's actually Zepbound. We're getting away from the shots. I think they're too strong, too many side effects. These novel ways of doing GLP-1 really work, and you know what? I think they're a lot safer.
Maybe I confused it. The trizepatide's the dissolvable dot, right? And then there was another product called drop, but the trizepatide is the dissolvable, correct?
Yeah, it's a dissolvable, and it gives wonderful control. In fact, one of our leaders tried it right before our group dinner, and I said, "How do you feel?" He goes, "I feel great." He goes, "I'm just not hungry."
Well, there you go. I wish that was my problem, but I don't want to lose any more weight. I feel like I'm in good shape. So, Doc, thank you for coming on. As always, you are the best. Again, folks, twc.health/Grant. Use that promo code Grant for 10% off. Stinchfield's Army Rolls. We'll see you on the Real America's Voice show tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Thanks for watching, everybody.